Now what the hell do you think you're doing with that tin star, boy?
Watch that boy shit, redneck. You talking to the sheriff of Rock Ridge.
There are films that make you laugh, and then there are films that make you think long after the credits roll. Blazing Saddles is both. Since its release in 1974, it has been celebrated as one of the most daring, boundary-pushing comedies ever committed to celluloid. People have analyzed its racial satire, marveled at its fourth-wall destruction, and memorized its most outrageous punchlines. Film students study it. Critics have written volumes about it. Mel Brooks has told his version of the story dozens of times across decades of interviews. But here is the thing nobody talks about enough. The real secret of Blazing Saddles was not the jokes. It was not the controversy. It was not even the brilliance of Brooks himself. The secret was a man who barely raised his voice for the entire film. A man who showed up on almost no notice, stepped into a role that was not written for him, and quietly became the reason the whole thing worked. That man was Gene Wilder, and what he understood about that film, what he quietly carried into every single scene, is something most fans have never fully appreciated, until now. To understand what Gene Wilder brought to Blazing Saddles, you first have to understand the circumstances under which he arrived. The role of the Waco Kid was not his from the beginning. It belonged to Gig Young, a well-regarded Hollywood actor with serious credentials. On paper, Young made complete sense for the part. He had range, experience, and the kind of weathered screen presence that a burned-out gunslinger would require. But the production fell apart before it ever truly began. On the very first day of filming, Gig Young showed up on set visibly unwell. He was shaking, disoriented, and unable to deliver his lines with any consistency. What initially confused some crew members quickly became clear to others. Young was in the grips of acute alcohol withdrawal, a medical crisis that was serious enough to halt production entirely. By midday, he had collapsed. He was removed from the set, and Mel Brooks was suddenly staring down the barrel of a major production with no lead actor for one of its central roles. Brooks did not hold auditions. He did not call his agent or schedule meetings with casting directors. He picked up the phone and called Gene Wilder directly. The two had already built a creative bond working together on the producers years earlier, and Brooks knew exactly what Wilder was capable of under pressure. What followed is one of the more remarkable moments in Hollywood history. Wilder, by all accounts, did not ask to read the script. He did not negotiate his salary or demand a detailed breakdown of the character. He simply said yes, packed his bags, and flew out the next morning. Less than 24 hours after that phone call, Gene Wilder was on set, jet-lagged and barely prepared, stepping into a role that would define a significant chapter of his career. That is the kind of trust that cannot be manufactured, and it set the tone for everything that followed. Here is where things get genuinely fascinating. When Gene Wilder agreed to take on the role, he came with one condition: not about money, not about billing, not about script approval in the traditional sense. His condition was something far more unusual, and it is the key to understanding why his performance works so brilliantly. Wilder told Mel Brooks that he would play the Waco Kid only if he could play the character completely straight, not for laughs, not with winks at the camera or exaggerated reactions designed to signal to the audience that something funny was happening. He wanted to play the Waco Kid as a genuinely broken human being, a man destroyed by his past, hollowed out by experience, and held together mostly by exhaustion and dry wit. He wanted the character to feel real in a film that was deliberately, spectacularly unreal in every other direction. For a director like Brooks, whose instinct was always to push further and louder, this could have been a creative argument waiting to happen. But Brooks, to his enormous credit, understood what Wilder was offering. He agreed, and that agreement quietly became the structural foundation of the entire film. Think about what Blazing Saddles is doing at full volume. It is skewering racism, dismantling Western mythology, breaking the fourth wall with gleeful abandon, and delivering some of the most audacious comedy ever staged in a Hollywood production. It is a film that operates in a near-constant state of controlled chaos. Into the middle of all that, Wilder walked with total stillness. While every other element of the film was screaming for attention, Wilder whispered, and somehow, impossibly, the whisper carried further than the screaming. When you go back and watch Blazing Saddles, specifically looking at Gene Wilder, something remarkable happens. You start to notice all the things he is not doing. He is not mugging for the camera. He is not telegraphing his punchlines. He is not leaning into the absurdity of the world around him. He observes it, reacts to it with barely concealed weariness, and occasionally offers commentary with the tone of a man who has seen every version of human foolishness and has long since stopped being surprised by any of it. His introduction in the jail cell is a perfect example. Slouched on a bunk, disheveled and half-present, the Waco Kid arrives not with a bang but with something closer to a long, slow exhale. Wilder plays the scene as though the character genuinely cannot muster the energy to perform, which, of course, is its own kind of performance, requiring tremendous discipline and control. The comedy does not come from anything Wilder does that is outwardly funny. It comes from the contrast between his total stillness and the madness swirling around him. Then there's the jailhouse conversation about his trembling hands, where the Waco Kid explains how he lost his nerve. In the hands of a less thoughtful actor, that moment would be played as a setup for a punchline and nothing more. Wilder plays it with genuine grief. There is real loss in his voice, real disappointment in his eyes. The humor is still there, but underneath it is something that feels unmistakably human. Mel Brooks later acknowledged that Wilder brought an emotional intelligence to that scene that went far beyond what the script had asked for. He did not just deliver the lines. He found the man behind the lines. This is the thing most fans never fully register when they watch the film. The Waco Kid is the only character in Blazing Saddles who seems to genuinely feel the weight of the world the film is satirizing. Everyone else is playing the satire. Wilder is living inside it. That distinction is what makes his performance not just good, but essential. Gene Wilder's influence during the production of Blazing Saddles extended well beyond his own scenes. By most accounts from people who were present during filming, Wilder became something of an unofficial emotional anchor for the entire cast and crew. While Brooks directed with his characteristic high-energy, boundary-testing approach, Wilder provided a different kind of leadership. He was calm, thoughtful, and deeply present in a way that set a standard for everyone working around him. Between takes, he was known to offer quiet guidance to other performers, not in the manner of someone asserting authority, but in the way a colleague who genuinely cares about the quality of the work might offer a gentle observation about timing or emphasis. Crew members who worked on the production have described him as someone who did not seek attention, but whose presence was consistently felt. He was, in the words of more than one person on set, the still center of a very chaotic production. There is also the matter of what Wilder was doing during his downtime on set, which turned out to have consequences far beyond Blazing Saddles. During breaks between filming, Wilder began sharing an idea with Brooks that had been developing in the back of his mind. He was curious about a character, a descendant of the infamous Dr. Frankenstein, who was so mortified by his family legacy that he desperately wanted nothing to do with it. He sketched out this concept in conversations between takes, and Brooks, initially distracted by the demands of the film they were already making, did not immediately grasp what Wilder was proposing. But Wilder believed in the idea enough to actually write a draft. When Brooks finally read it, he recognized something genuinely special. That idea born on the set of Blazing Saddles, in conversations stolen during the chaos of production, would eventually become Young Frankenstein, one of the most beloved horror comedies ever made. The creative environment of one film directly gave birth to another landmark. Without Blazing Saddles, Young Frankenstein almost certainly never happens, at least not in the form we know it. Not everything about the production of Blazing Saddles was creative collaboration and spontaneous inspiration. The film was deeply controversial within the studio system long before a single audience member had seen it. Warner Brothers executives were deeply uncomfortable with the film's unfiltered approach to racial satire. They pushed for changes, sent notes demanding softer language, and lobbied for the removal of scenes they felt went too far in their direct confrontation of American racism and institutional hypocrisy. Mel Brooks fought those battles publicly and forcefully, which is the version of the story most people know. But Gene Wilder fought them too, in his own quieter way. In production meetings and private conversations, Wilder consistently supported Brooks's original vision. He understood that the power of the film lived in its willingness to make the audience uncomfortable in service of a larger truth. Satire that does not disturb anyone is not really satire. It is just comedy with delusions of grandeur. Wilder reportedly argued, in his characteristically understated way, that the shocking elements of the film were not gratuitous. They were the whole point. Removing the racial slurs, softening the portrayal of the townspeople's ignorance, or blunting the edges of the film's confrontational humor would have gutted everything that made it worth making. His support gave Brooks an important ally at a time when the pressure from the studio was significant, and his credibility, earned through his previous work on The Producers, gave his backing meaningful weight in those discussions. What is worth appreciating about this chapter of the story is that Wilder was not a producer or director. He had no formal power in those conversations. He was an actor standing up for a film he believed in because he understood what it was trying to do. That quiet resolve, that willingness to take a principled stand without dramatics or ultimatums, was entirely consistent with everything else about how he approached the production. Over the years, as Blazing Saddles settled into its place as an undisputed classic, Gene Wilder spoke about it in interviews with a clarity and honesty that slowly revealed the full picture of what he had been trying to accomplish. He confirmed what perceptive viewers had always sensed, but never quite been able to articulate, that his approach to the Waco Kid had been a deliberate, philosophical decision rooted in his understanding of how comedy actually works. Wilder explained that the funniest characters are often the saddest ones. That laughter, real laughter, the kind that stays with you after a film ends, almost always comes from a place of recognition. When an audience laughs at the Waco Kid, they are not just laughing at a joke. They are laughing at something true, at the feeling of having seen too much and cared too deeply, and ended up with nothing to show for it except an unsteady hand and a dry sense of humor. That is a feeling a great many people understand, whether they would articulate it that way or not. He also confirmed something about the structure of the film's comedy that most people miss entirely. The reason the louder, broader, more outrageous moments in Blazing Saddles work as well as they do is precisely because of the quiet moments. Without the stillness Wilder brought, the chaos would have had nothing to play against. Comedy operates on contrast. The punchline lands harder when the setup has been calm. The absurdity is funnier when someone in the room is treating it seriously. Wilder was that someone for the entire duration of the film. Blazing Saddles has now been recognized by the Library of Congress as culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant, worthy of preservation in the National Film Registry. That is a remarkable designation for a film that studio executives once wanted to sand down into something safe and inoffensive. The film survived those pressures, and it endures today, because the people who made it refused to compromise what made it matter. Gene Wilder's contribution to that endurance is impossible to overstate. He arrived at almost no notice, under chaotic circumstances, and brought something to the film that nobody had thought to ask for: emotional truth. In a movie built on exaggeration, he was the one element that never exaggerated. In a story about the absurdity of human prejudice, he played the one character who seemed genuinely tired of it all, and in doing so, he gave the satire its soul. Most fans remember Blazing Saddles for its boldest moments. What they never quite figure out is that those bold moments work because of the quietest performance in the film. Gene Wilder finally confirmed it. But if you watch carefully enough, his performance has been saying it all along.